see my screen?
Yeah, everything.
Okay, awesome. Saw the thumbs up from Tiffany. That's perfect. All right, so just 3 things I put in here, and I'll send you guys these charts after today so you can have them. But the types of things we do at Boeing, so you know the perspective I'm coming from, is it is the world's largest aerospace company. And so it does have, it was interesting, my career has gone from where I started right out of college with a company that was about 20,000 people up in the Valley. And then after about 6 years, I moved to a small company that was about 400 people, big difference. And then my small 400-person company got bought by Boeing, 180,000 people, big difference. So I've gotten to see how do you interact with people in small environments, big environments, and medium environments. So it's kind of like the Goldilocks thing. So Boeing's a big company. The types of things that we do are, we have our commercial side, basically airplanes, and then services, space, which is a lot of what you guys are probably excited about. You know, I was very, an example of that is while I was working in Houston earlier this year on the Starliner, the commercial crew that's taking people up and back to the, will be taking people up and back to the space station. I got to meet the astronauts. How cool is that? So anyway, that space is fun. Space is really fun, but it's hard. So, and then defense, of course, air, all kinds of stuff, helicopters, things that are on the ground supporting, you know, our folks that defend us. So a lot of parts to Boeing. It's a big company, and that kind of gives you a where this perspective is coming from. This was the class I mentioned that I teach, and about once a year I do this at Chapman University. So this is, I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly, but I think it'll have some things that you guys find interesting. So this is really focused on communicating technical topics to others. And that does include when Vincent saw, well, I see the part that you maybe spend a little more time on how to do a good interview, because all of our folks will have to be worried about that. So I will go on that part a little bit heavier. But I have in my career had to give a lot of presentations to large audiences. When I first joined Boeing, I got on this program. It's a $21 billion program, and just our little piece, I got to be the chief software engineer of it. And so I would go into these reviews that had 1,000 people in these reviews. And you're thinking, well, how do you communicate with 1,000 people? Well, a lot, you know, probably 400 are in person, probably another 600 on the phone, and everybody throwing darts at you, you know, and that's the hard part, because when you're a software engineer and that can present to audiences, you will find this, you will all find this, as you get out there in the engineering world and you are able to interact and share what you believe, they will put you up front right away. And so really fun after you get used to it, actually. So I'll just say be ready for that. But this is some of those lessons learned from those types of experiences. The number one rule of all when you're talking and you're presenting or sharing information is know your information. That is something that's recurring. If you know your topic better than anybody else in the room, then you'll never be nervous. You might be nervous, you know, how did it come across or things like that. How many times did I say or like or things like, you might worry about all those things, but you're not going to be worried that somebody is going to know your topic better than you. So the first rule of technical communications is to know your information better than the people you're presenting it to. And I'll give them some details, but when you present with confidence, energy, and passion, different ways to do that. But one of the things that I learned early on is there'll never be anybody more excited about what you're saying than you. So if you walk in and you're dead, droning, that kind, everybody else going to sleep, right? That's just the way it works. And if you're excited about something you're doing on a satellite design or something like that in your club, if you're presenting to a professor or somebody like that, or you're in an interview and you're talking about that experience, if you talk to it with a spark of excitement, people will pick up on a passion that makes them want to be around you more, just the way it works. So be okay with showing your excitement and passion about what you do. That's really a key thing there. Find ways to relate with your audience, and when all else fails and you want to get a point across, use repetition. And back again, when I give this class, I have the class tell me, say it, know your information, because that everything comes back to that. Knowing your information does come, like I mentioned, I had several things I started with in my career with the perfect storm. I had this presentation that I knew was for about 600 people. I was new to a project, but I was okay because all I had to do was MC and run the event. And then 2 days before the event, our person who was our expert on databases, our database technology expert, said that they had a family emergency, couldn't be there. They said, but Mark, you're familiar with all the material you just presented. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. I don't know anything about the details of syncing up these databases and with low latency networks, so across, or high latency networks and dropouts across a battlefield. I have no idea. They said, oh, you'll be fine. Stick to charts. And if anything goes wrong, you'll have these experts will make sure that are there for you, sitting off to your left. You just look at them. So I'm up there briefing. I got hundreds of people there, and somebody decides to throw a question at me that they know is an unsolvable problem. You know, you guys have all heard like these NP complete problems or intractable problems. Yes, they knew it, but they were testing me. And so I, of course, didn't know the answer. And I look over to my experts and I look at them and I'm waiting for them to come up with some brilliance. And they all look at me and they go, we have no idea. And so the other part about this is be okay with saying, I don't know the answer to that. And we'll get back to you. You know, that's an answer that I think is really important, that once people get comfortable with not being omniscient, I think you do much better. People do much better because you have to get comfortable in your shoes to say, I don't know. But you come up with a clever way to say that, of course, but you coming across with the fact that you don't know everything is okay. And you will run into some aggressive situations that people will often in industry be sent to take you down. It's just a part of business, right? Not everybody wants everybody else to be highly successful in business. So the key thing there is know your information. Presenting with passion, energy, and competence. You know, there's the one person you don't want to be, where you're terrified and everybody can tell it. There's the other one you don't want to be, where you're half asleep as you're droning on. And then there's the one that doesn't foster believability, the overly excited presenter. And so the important part is find a middle ground in there. I talked about being passionate and expressing your energy, but it has to be authentic. So if you're excited about something, allow yourself to be excited and people will get excited with you. And as I said, nobody will be more excited in the material you're presenting than you. I'm going to keep going through a couple of these slides. I'll go past quickly because we're going to be a little bit shorter here today. Audience participation. And okay, I'm going to go past this one. This actually comes straight out of a class from UC Riverside. I will tell you a story. I'm sitting at UC Riverside and we have a class on electrical engineering that all computer science majors must take and pass to get their degree. But they knew the teacher was brutal. He took no prisoners. And so everybody was terrified of him. Dr. Everett. I don't know if he's still around, but anyway, everybody was terrified. So we go to class and nobody said a word for like a week and a half. And of course, I can't stand that. I hate feeling like there's this thing that everybody's afraid. They're walking on eggshells in this class, you know? So he's talking about turning in reports, and somewhat unintentionally, I raised my hand and I said, I have a question. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, somebody spoke, you know? And he said, Mr. Boyd, what can I do for you? And I asked a really obvious question just to see what would happen, right? You know, something like, do you want these reports double spaced or single spaced? Which actually that had, you know, it's just kind of one of those questions. But he walked over, put his hands on each side of my desk and read me the riot act for a good 10 minutes. And, you know, it's one of those nightmares where you look around and everybody in the seats around you are all gone, right? There's now space amongst you and every other student. And so, but I lived. And then about 3 days later, we got back to class and I put up my hand again and I'm just firing off a question, you know, because I don't like that relationship. So fear is not a good way to work, right? So I think one thing is, you know, knowing when you can just be legitimate and get past that is really important. And I learned that at UCR. So I thought I'd share that story with you. By the way, ended up at the end of the year, that professor had 3 of us over to his house for barbecue. And I was one of the 3 because I got to know him, you know, He was actually turned out to be a nice guy. I don't know why he scared the daylights out of all the kids, but turned out to be a nice guy after all. Let's see. Audience benefit payoff. I'm going to talk a bit more about this when we get to interviews. This is a key thing that there's a recurring theme here, is that when you're talking to somebody in an interview or an audience, or you're trying to present something you're a representative of a company to another company, if you understand what keeps them up at night, you will be very successful if you have an answer or a remedy for what keeps them up at night. That's like a big deal I will share with you guys, that it is worth doing the homework. I used to be I was a product manager for product when I was in that little company. And my technique was I would do the research on the company I was about to go share our product with. I would find what their biggest challenges were that I could find online. And when I walked in there, I had a presentation that magically targeted that need. And it seemed like the percentage of successes went through the roof. So I will say that if you understand what your audience keeps them up at night, and you address it and you talk to it, you'll be much more raise your chance of success a lot. Okay, I'm gonna talk to a interview technique that Vincent heard this and he said, "Oh, you got to share that with everybody." We were interviewing. I was on a big program, about 500 people. This is probably 12 years ago, and the deputy director was getting promoted. So we had to go interview for another deputy director, and we must have seen 30 people, interviewed 30 people. And then all of them were just kind of okay. And then at one day, this lady walks in, her name was Mary, and we did the normal interview, it was fine. And then she opens up her binder and she says, "Do you have time for a couple questions for me?" And we said, sure, that's great. And she said, and she looked at the director and said, "I noticed you published a couple of things here where you cited some challenges you're having. Have you ever found any solutions to this, or are you still working through that?" And it just floored him, because somebody had taken the time to go learn what he had been dealing with and asked him, and then she made some suggestions. Okay, now he's floored at that point. And then she looks at me and she said, "And I realized when you presented this, that it looked like you were still doing this and that. Have you looked into this practice? Because I'm wondering if that would have paid off for you." And by the way, so this technique floored us all. She got the job, by the way. At the end of the story, she got the job. But it wasn't because she was head and shoulders better than everybody else. It was because she took the time to go understand what was keeping us up at night, or our interests, and then she connected. So when we walked out of 40 interviews, there was only one person that stood off the page, that jumped off the page at us. So I will tell you, if you're going to do interviewing, learn about where you're going, go beyond the curtain, so to speak, and figure out what their passion, interest, and problems might be, their challenges. And if you can engage them on that front, you will. And if you do it in a way that's, with your knowledge base, you might say something like, "That's interesting. When we were building in our satellite club, in our aerospace club, we were doing this back at UC Riverside, and we found XYZ really worked really well." Okay, you're just speaking from experience, but now you have connected. And I think that's a key thing. Is that making sense to you guys? Looking for some head nods here. All right. So if you ever go on an interview and you don't do your homework, what did they say? Those who fail to prepare or those who fail to prepare are preparing to fail, right? So if you ever go on an interview and you haven't done at least your homework on it, you're just going to go in and assume you're going to fail. All right. That's probably something to keep in your mind. If you actually care about the job, go do your time. Okay. So that's kind of one of the things I hear. Let's keep going. And let's see, how much time do I have? Rebecca, Tiffany, Vincent, how much time do I have? Just so I know that I'm not going way over.
We're at 122.
Can I go till about, 1:45 in the question, something like that, 1:40?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'll try to target
1:45
1:40 and we'll do questions. Yeah, perfect. All right, but the number one engagement strategies, and I kind of said, it's not suspense. As I've said over and over, that's it. Okay, so you guys, no surprise there. I was telling Vincent a story that I had when we were in the early days of my career, we created a system. At that time, computers did a lot of very simple processing of data from satellites. We came up with a way to do something very new and different in a prototype that, I don't know if you guys recall, in the 90s, we had the Persian Gulf War, and there was some really unfortunate, a lot of lives lost and things like that. It was really sad. But this prototype that we were coming up with actually would have, had it been used, could have had an impact on the number of lives lost. So we were meeting with some folks in the military, and I think that one thing, if you're in aerospace, you're probably going to deal with the military at some point. One thing you'll know that they take extraordinarily seriously is protecting their folks. I mean, if you're talking about budgets and systems and this and that and the other, that's one thing. If you're talking to them about lives lost, I mean, that's big. I mean, you'll find out that's the way it should be, right? So we go in and we're talking to them. And one of the things that we mentioned was this prototype was able to do something that would have saved some lives. And the entirety of the conversation changed. It stopped. We were there with a 4-star general. He stopped everything. He wanted to go investigate. And in fact, it would have. And what we then had was several millions of dollars for us to get that prototype in their hands so that they could use it and they could do better at protecting their folks. So I think that's an example of something that this idea of what keeps your audience up at night. If you're working with DoD, of course, it's people safety is probably number one always. But different people have different things. If you're in corporate America, you might have, how am I getting my development schedules online? How am I making that launch date? Things like that. So this is, once again, a big idea. And know your information. Let's see if there's anything here I want to mention. I'm going to keep going a little bit faster. I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do. This is one my wife does. I did a presentation for her. She's a personal organizer, and she tries to remove clutter from people's personal lives. So we did this slide, and this is one of the things when she briefs audiences, and it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, cluttered, crazy, chaotic, right? And then she says, but we can fix that. And the whole point is that there's an emotional response in a lot of times to what you're saying or what you're showing, whether using multimedia or that if her objective is to make people think that she can take them from this sense of stress and chaos into a sense of placid kind of calm, that's her whole objective. When I was asking her, well, what do you want to do? And she explained it. And I said, okay, well, we can try to come up with something that creates a stressful situation and then magically it cleans up. So that's one thing we did with her. So, I mean, just using multimedia sometimes is good, whether it's video or audio or things like that. Other things that she does is looks at fun facts tend to stick in people's minds if you're trying to get a point across. The idea that based on Newsweek, we spend 3 to 4 years of our lives looking for things you can't find. Okay, that'll stick in your mind a bit, The idea, things like that, the average executive wastes 6 weeks a year looking for missing information in messy offices. Okay, that's like, you'd be like, really? That's crazy, right? So these types of facts, I think, for her, gets the point across to her customers that this doesn't have to be you, right? And that's what we do with her. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to pause for a second. Any thoughts on what I've shared with you guys so far?
Yes, I have a question. How would you find out who is interviewing you and how to do your research on them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the company. I think a lot of times, if you're doing a small company, you could look up a lot of times the folks that are either in HR or some of the managers. When I was doing my 400-person company, they arranged the interview ahead of time, and I could see on the email invite who was coming. So you could sometimes see that. If you're in a big company, it's sometimes harder. So you almost have to look at the organization that you're going to. Like if you were going to Boeing and you were interviewing with, say, somebody in avionics or somebody in there that's doing satellite fabrication or the software for satellites, if you know that's where you're going, you can kind of Google around for that. But like I said, the harder part, smaller companies, a little easier. Look at the emails, look at the meeting notices, and then bigger companies, a little bit harder. Focus on that part of the business that they're doing. That's what I would do.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I've gotten a few interviews, except they had it where I upload a video of me answering a question, so I don't have someone else giving me feedback at the same time. So how would I like stand out in those video interviews?
Well, do you have, well, I guess it depends. I know some of those video interviews are very specific to the topics that they want you to talk to. If you have the latitude to introduce more than a very specific topic, you could take the same tactic that I was talking about on your interviews. If they give you, I guess it's really a question of whether they are looking for you to just answer their questions, or whether most interviewers, if they're good, will ask you, do you have any questions for me? When you're doing video interviews, do you have that ability to do stuff like that?
No, they give me like 3 questions. I don't interact with anyone. They don't, yeah. So it's all automated and I don't get to ask questions.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, in that case, the only thing I can really say is if you don't have the ability to, sooner or later, you're going to probably meet with a human, right? That's probably the first filter is what you're dealing with there. Is that likely?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I passed the interview stage and then I got to meet them, but it was just kind of weird to do the videos.
Yeah, so on the videos, if it's just a one-way kind of video thing where you're answering their questions, I would say the only advice I would give you is I've seen people refer to experience. If you're answering a question, try to answer their question. You always answer the question directly. Don't sidestep it, right? So number one, make sure you answer the question. Number two is if you can speak from experience. I gave the example earlier about somebody might ask you, what are the biggest design challenges you see in this type of engineering or something like that. And you could, if you speak from an experience, you could say something, you answer the question first, and you say, an example is when I was working in the aerospace club or I was taking this class, we had to develop a chip, or we had to develop a circuit to do this, or we had to make it so that it had a communication path that was this or whatever. When you tie it back to something that you are excited about that is related to the question, that could make you jump off the page. I know when I've interviewed people, they can either answer the question, stop, or they can answer the question and then tie it to something that they've done that is relevant. And I think that's when they start jumping off the page, because they'll show the spark lights up in their eyes. You're starting to see that they aren't just reading a textbook and reciting the answer they Googled, right? Now they're speaking from experience, and that makes them differentiated. Does that help?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's keep going. Some lessons learned from the trenches. This is one I shared with Vincent that I learned a long time ago that in business, sometimes people would look down at the end of the room, they would find the person that's least involved in the conversation, and they would say, you take the minutes, right? I found that, and you'll hear this a couple of places in this presentation, that taking the minutes to a meeting is really powerful. So what's funny is I'm now a Senior Tech Fellow in Boeing for software. There's only 2 of us in Boeing, right? But every meeting I go to, I take the minutes, because I've learned when you write history, you drive the future. So, and it may not seem that way at first, but trust me, in business, it's really important to be in control of the message and in control of the way that history is recorded. So if I'm driving a meeting, this is one aspect of that. is say that I know that I have a particular objective I want out of a meeting. It's really important that you get consensus and that people all are on the same page with they contributed toward that answer, even if you knew the answer going in. So a really important thing to think about is how you interact with people to arrive at the result. This was, I had a boss that his name was Paul, and he was a director on a program I worked. And he used to tell me, or people used to tell me, that when he went into an audience and worked out an answer, we could come out with the same answer, but he would leave that audience. He would tell them how idiotic they all were and how his answer was right. And they would exit with, he would be convincing them what idiots they were and all that. And they would all leave feeling like idiots, and everybody hated him, but he got his answer. The other way to do it is you come out of that room with everybody in the room feeling like a genius, like they had all arrived at that answer together. And if they had not been there, the world would have caved in, right? And they were all, so there's a couple ways to arrive at an answer. And I think it's important to, if you want to have a team collaborate, be willing to listen to other people. You might actually get a better answer, which is the point of collaboration, of course. But when you're working with others, it's really important to recognize, do you make everybody feel like they're not part of the solution or part of the solution? It's a really key thing. One simple process that I've seen used is you let everybody arrive at the answer, and then when they do, you make sure you're writing it down, right? And give full credit. That's one thing. They always have a quote that the leader who doesn't care who gets the credit is the best leader, or there's something like that. It's very close, right? So that's really important, is that I know that for me, when I go into a meeting, even if I may know what I want out of the meeting, if I can have a bunch of experts arrive at that and I don't take credit for any piece of it, that's incredibly powerful, right? Because now we've got this consensus of experts who have just made this great move for our company forward. And they all get the credit, and they're all valued, and they all go home at the end of the day feeling like they want to do it again tomorrow. Really big deal, right? So it's really interesting that when you see something you like, you write it down immediately. When you see something you don't like, pause, have a good discussion, and there's a chance it may be better than what you wanted. So anyway, so I shared with Vincent one other thing that he thought was kind of interesting. There was this thing called the technique of trying to make people feel like geniuses, but arrive at the right answer that you really wanted to, and you wanted to take them down that path. I'll give you an example of it. And I was showing Vincent a card trick, right? And I referred to this, so Vincent, you can't show them the card trick. You can't explain this, but I'll show you 3 cards. So Rebecca, we're going to use you. So I've got card 1, 2, and 3, right? And so hold up, pick one of those cards. Pick up 1, 2, or 3.
All right, I'll do 2.
Okay. So see what that, can you see that card?
Yeah, I can see it.
It's a 9 of clubs, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you chose the 9 of clubs. And so if I hit next slide on my chart, I'm going to call this the illusion of free will. Okay. All right. Okay. So you're probably, if you haven't seen this before, you're probably wondering, how do you do that? There were 3 cards there, and he just, right? So, so those that know magic know exactly how you do this. But point being, and I'll tell you, I mean, so the idea is I let you believe that you were making a choice, but you really didn't have a choice at all, right? And I'll show you. Had you said card 1, I would have said something like, okay, well, we're throwing that one away and we got 2 left. Which one do you pick? If you had said card 3, I would have said, okay, there's the other one we're throwing away. What's left? The 9 of clubs. So you changed the game to arrive at you believing you made that choice, right? But I knew all along, no matter what you said, we were getting the 9 of clubs, right? And so that kind of goes along this path. But you fully believed, you were thinking for a while there, how did he do that, right? Am I right?
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So
Got
that
me.
goes along with this. Well, now you guys know how to do a new card trick. Okay. But the point is the same message that how you craft your interaction with people, you can arrive at the answer or the place you want to go, and they believe they took you there, right? Not always true. Okay. So that's true on both sides of the coin, by the way. So also when you're doing an interview or you're having a meeting with some people, thinking about the techniques that arrive at your objective are really important. And then if you're also prey to that, it's also good to know these things so you can know what's happening to you, right? So it's really good on both sides. So when I talk about technical communication and conveying an idea or trying to get the outcome focused interactions, this is one that's important. And I already said this, be the one to take the notes of the meeting. The writing history is powerful. Okay, a couple more things and then we'll see. Let's see, I got 39. Okay, so I'll give you like 2 or 3 more minutes. Know your audience, comfort zone, and motivation. What are they? If I'm talking to a bunch of business majors, I talk very differently than I talk to engineering folks. So know who you're talking to and use examples. Like if I'm talking engineering, it's easy for me as I work for Boeing and we do cool stuff. So that's easy. If I'm talking to a bunch of business folks, boy, I've got to go do some homework on how to connect with them. There's the second one here is Berkman profile. When you're working with folks, in Boeing, we have learned over many years that understanding the tendencies of the people you work with makes for better interactions. It's 2 recognitions. One is that we're very different people from each other, right? We come from different places. We have diverse backgrounds. We're very different people amongst each other. One example of a personality profile is called Berkman. I just actually recently did a new one. They just had us do called DISC, but they're all kind of to some extent the same, where they try to ask you a bunch of questions and they identify you. I have the lifestyle grid out here for Berkman. People that are motivated by getting the job done, and if you were, I just need to say that I got it done and I don't care who I stepped on to get there, you'd be upper left. If you're down lower right, yellow, then what you like is that you have a set of things to do and you've got it, all the lists checked off. If you're down in the blue, you just want to go home at the end of the day and have created something. You're an inventor, you're innovator. And if you're up in the green, you care what people think. You go home at the end of the day, you feel good if the people around you, they respected you, you had a good interaction and things like that. So I had a person working on one of my teams that was our requirements lead, and we could not communicate. We could not get on the same page. When we did this Berkman thing, she came out, she was lower left yellow, and I was up here in the green. So the first thing that Berkman said, when you're talking with her, rather than talking to her about all these things that are great to get done because we're going to try to accomplish this, hand her a list. And then what you'll find is at the end of the day, when she gets your list done, she goes home happy, wanting to come back the next day. That's a very big difference. So what I'll say is when you're interacting with people, recognize that we're all very diverse and different people, and that there are different ways you can interact and you can do things differently to make a different outcome. So that's a key thing to recognize. A lot of times it's not what you say, it's what people hear. Let's see, I'm going to keep going. I'm almost done. Let's keep going. Words, this is an example of it. Okay, just the last couple thoughts and then I'll go to questions. Technical discussions. I've often told people when you are asking people for their opinions or asking for an answer, if they start with the answer well, pretty much they're in trouble at that point. So I'll say, did we get the answers we needed on calculating the navigation position? Well, what you're looking for is yes, we got it, right? You want something that's somewhat assured. Other things that I have had to work on with my kids is that they have a habit of speaking with the word and like as every 5th word in their vocabulary. So another thing I try to work with my kids on is when they are interacting with folks. Be very careful that you don't speak like I'm gonna talk every third word is or like. It's kind of, well, like, you know, we're going to be, and like, we got this answer over here, and like, so be careful of that. It gets in the way. So I'll just say that's a good thing to self-reflect on when you're interacting with people at an interview or something like that. How it looks does matter. If your presentation and the material you're presenting and the words you're presenting does matter. If it comes across as chaotic, people will think that you're a chaotic person. So what you show them is their only window into your personality. So if you look like you're well prepared, look like it mattered, then people will believe that you are well prepared and that you can accomplish things that matter. Dress code depends on your audience. So it's really if I'm going to go present in front of the Joint Armed Services Committee, you're darn right I'm wearing a tie. I am gonna wear a tie. If I'm presenting to you guys, I'm probably, dressed kind of casually. So I think it does matter. Your mannerisms. Another one I was showing, I showed you this one, Vincent, but I will go to meetings all the time. I couldn't care less about the meeting, but you have to be there looking like you do care. So if you lean back and you're kind of like this, that says one thing. If you're sitting there like this, it says you're kind of interested. And if you sit there with your fingers connected, it says that you're not only interested, but you're thinking about something technical or something you're figuring out, but you're thinking about their stuff. So a good thing is if you're in a meeting and you're kind of leaning forward, you're sitting like this, people will believe that you're engaged. And all these things matter. So when you're in an interview, you're in a class, if you want it to matter what they think about you and how you're engaged, think about those mannerisms. How you use your hands, things like that. Last couple things I'll just mention. We had to go through media training at Boeing, and I didn't do that for the first 20 years of my career. The first time I went to media training, because we had to go and do some interviews in front of some of the press, really hard. I thought I had pretty good demeanor in front of people, and then when they videoed me and showed me back the video, I was terrible, and I'm still not great. I mean, it's really hard to look good on video. It's good. It's easy to vamp in front of an audience and just kind of pontificate and discuss. But when you're getting videoed in an interview, it's a good practice to, if you're going to do a mock interview, video it, watch, and then fix it, and then do it again. And that way, wow, that was a really bad answer, or wow, when I said that answer, I leaned back like I was scared. Or when I said this answer, I looked like I had it. Yes, I was in, and look at it from outside being yourself. So I think it's really important to video yourself when you're practicing and address your fixes. And then learn from others and your mistakes. My two sons, who are both in college right now, they look at interviewing as a club sport. I heard this first from my older son. He's a business major at Clemson. And he used to schedule interviews for internships to get the experience of having done the interviews. So he went through 8 or 9 interviews, and he got good at interacting with the interviewers, figured out what stories he was telling that resonated, figured out which ones didn't, which ones had dead ends, and he continued to refine the interviewing art that he knew and the answers that people liked. When an interviewer thought, that's a clever answer, I really like that. Okay, he put that on I'm using that one in the next interview. And so before you know it, after 8 or so interviews, he was getting this list of things that worked really well. And he didn't schedule the ones he cared about until like 9 or 10. So on the 9th one, he went to interview with Deloitte and Ernst & Young, 9th and 10th. And it was no surprise he did relatively well there. He starts his job at Ernst & Young next year. But it wasn't an accident, is my point to you. Remember, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So use interviewing as your experience, getting experience. View it as a club sport. You wouldn't play a club sport without practicing multiple times a week and showing up really good at the games. Don't do that with your careers. So that's kind of my takeaway there. And I think that might be my last slide. So questions?
I actually had a question for you. By the way, thank you so much for the information. It's so useful. But as like a new person going into my career with little to no finance or professional experience in general, like, do you have any tips or tricks for how to effectively tell someone you don't know how to do something, but like that you're willing to learn?
Yeah. So I guess, can you give me an example, if you could, about something you don't want to do, but you're willing to learn? Like, give me just a quick example, because I think if it were something core to their business, you might have to be a little more cautious on how you say it. If it was something just kind of peripheral, on the periphery of their business, then you could maybe just blurt it out, but give me an example, would you?
Like, say maybe like a platform I don't need to use, how, on the business side of things, they use a lot of different types of, what's the word? Like, no, just like platforms like Excel. Obviously I know how to use Excel, but there are more like advanced ones where I'd have to,
The tool chains and things, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely. So if there is a tool that they want to know if you have experience in, let's hope that, well, for one, if you were able to do in your research before you did your interview, and you're able to find what kind of tools that company used, you'd want to do some minimal learning online of what that tool was, right?
Okay.
If you can find out what they do and it's core to the job they're asking you to do, go do what you can. Spend a few hours just learning what you can, and that when you walk in an interview, you at least can speak the language. You can say, something like, I've done some research on that tool set, and it's similar to what we use here. Directing it back to what your experience in is, maybe your survival, your life raft. Because if they say, yeah, here's a modeling tool for engineering, and you've never used it before, but you looked it up, and you even if you get caught cold, you can say, okay, well, on that modeling tool, we've done it in CAD this, or we've done our modeling in Cameo, or we've done our modeling in this. It has very similar kind of functions from what we can tell. So you're dragging them back to the fact that you do have knowledge of how to do these things. It might not be in the exact tool, and then you could finish that up with, but it would be exciting to understand the specific tools that you guys are doing and how we could apply what I've already experienced into that. You know what I'm saying? So you're now tying your experience with your excitement to learn their tools.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Other questions?
Oh, yes, I actually have a question. So would you have any tips on just standing out in applications? Because, you have to get through that screening phase first, right, before you get the interview. So do you have any tips? Because right now I'm thinking of like just researching the company and emailing, finding the recruiters and emailing them to see what I can do.
Yeah, I let's see. So I will tell you that probably my recommendations are more about the second level than that first filter, because a lot of times the first filter is digital, and they're looking for keywords, things like that, that really you can do your research on the company. You can figure out things like their tools, their techniques, and get the buzzwords for that company by looking at their website and things like that. So you could infuse your resume with common terminology and that kind of a thing. That's probably not bad, but the digital filters are a challenge. Certainly if you can, like I said, still the practice that I talked about research the company, and if you can, research the people in the division that you're gonna go to. That's always good, because once that digital filter passes, the people are going to get handed a resume, and they're going to be looking down it, and you're going to want to differentiate yourself to them, right? So that research it like you're doing is probably the wise thing. Include the terminology, make sure they think you're speaking the same language as them, as they are. that would be my recommendation for that filter phase. And then it sets you up well once you get past the filter and they're having that discussion with you, the resume is in front of it, and you've now kind of already postured yourself to have a good discussion from your resume, right?
Yeah, I think
Other
that would
questions?
help a lot. And also,
Yeah, I actually, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking like just any tips for like cover letters as well.
So let me ask you guys, since I can only speak on the cover letter part as far as what would matter to me or the folks I've interacted with. Let me ask you, from your experiences, are they having you write a cover letter, or do they allow you to include quotes, professors or people like that, or is it strictly you writing the cover letter?
It's really just me writing the cover letter and turning it in with the application as well.
Okay, I think the same kind of stuff holds. I mean, I would say that I would love to give you some additional magic, but I think relating to the company and connecting with the people that are reviewing it would be the same on your resume as it would be in the cover letter. I think the same principles hold. I think that once again, using your excitement about the things you've done. You know, you're not in an aerospace club strictly for hanging out once a week and having beers. I mean, you guys are doing it because you love these kinds of things, right? Well, don't answer. If it's just the beers, don't answer. But you guys are excited about this stuff, right? I mean, some part of it excites you. So that's the part you want to get across from your classes, from your projects, from your clubs. Find a way to get that excitement into the stuff you send off somehow. And I think that's the best thing when you actually do get to a human interaction. Being alert, excited, appearing like you've done your homework and being diligent. Wow, I mean, they're going to gobble you guys up when you guys hit industry. What else? What else you guys got?
I got a question. So I get a lot of mixed answers when I ask my friends, certain, depending on who I ask, right? Does GPA matter that much when you're trying to look for work in the industry? Some people say it's really important. Some people say it doesn't really matter. So I wanted to hear your take on it.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you my personal take is that there's a low bar that, I mean, you can look at somebody's GPA and you can say the college mattered, and you don't have to be a straight A student by any means to know that college mattered. Like you were showing up there to learn, right? Let's say you've got a D or C average, or you're really struggling or something like that. There's a different message that goes with that than, do you need to be 4.0 or 3.8? Does that matter? I would say, no, that doesn't matter. Once you start getting into the C range or something that says pattern of really struggling, then it might. But I would say those gradients up in the 3s, to me, I mean, everybody's getting Bs. Everybody's going to get a C maybe now and then, or something like that. And I'll just be upfront. I got an F in college. All right. At UC Riverside, I took my third quarter calculus, that third quarter, spring quarter of calculus. I won't go into reasons why, but I got an F. I had to retake it. But the good news is I made some changes. I was in a rock band. Okay, you can tell behind me. I was not paying attention. Anyway, so I quit the band. I focused on school, and I really got my GPA up to like a 3.7, 3.8 from there out. I mean, it scared me. It said, you could play music and get C's and D's, but you're not going to really go anywhere in life. So I'd rather have music as a hobby. And I got back up to like a 3.8 kind of a thing, because I was paying attention. But I do think employers, there's a level that if it's below it, you give a message. But in the 3s, up 3.5, I mean, what are you talking about there? I mean, are you talking like low or in the gradients of 3s?
Gradients of 3s, yeah.
I think if you're in the 3s, especially above a 3.5, it means that you were being serious about college. You put out the effort to keep your grades in largely A's, some B's, whatever. And and then you and what you are about, that goes away at that point, right? And then all people care about is you at that point. Is this person somebody who's we're gonna want as part of our team, that's gonna add value to our team? So yeah, I think it's up in especially the top part of the threes. It's like, it just says you were paying attention in college, you know.
I have a question. So what if a student had below a 3, but they had that work experience compared to like a student that had above a 3? Would you guys still consider that student with the work experience over the student with the GPA?
Well, I think that's a great question, by the way. I think that the below a 3, you could certainly, work experience will absolutely do it. But I think you would have to, you've got a little bit of an extra burden at that point, because you're kind of showing the interviewer, yeah, I had less than a 3, but I'm special because, in a good way, not special, but I mean, I am a special talent because of this, my passion or my knowledge, or this is what's going to make me a good part of your team, right? So I think in the end, in the interviews I've seen, you're always looking for somebody who can bring value to your team. That will be both a member of the team, bring diverse thinking, bring quality and value. That's the bottom line. I would say if you're in the 2s in GPA, you might actually get asked, you seem like an incredibly bright person who's on the ball. What happened? You know what I mean? I mean, that might be the question, because I mean, that might be the thought. But I think everybody's different. I think good work experience is really good. And I would say that overall, you want to show that you're somebody who is going to, they would be a big mistake to let you go, right? And that no matter what your GPA is. So I think, I'm not trying to sidestep your question. I hope that I gave you enough of an answer there that it certainly isn't bad, but you may get asked about it, and you're going to have a little extra burden, little bit, not entirely. Everybody has a burden of showing that they're valuable to the company. That's everybody. You may have a slightly extra one because you have to, show that here's what happened, and I don't know if your tactic is to hit it head on or not, that kind of a thing. Is that making sense, Joseph?
Yeah, that made sense. Thank you.
Yeah, but by all means, you succeed or fail, and when you get to that human element, if you can convey that you're going to be a talent and a value and somebody that they want to work with, that's how you get in that door, and that's how you get that job. So focus there.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Any other questions?
Yes, another question for me. I've been told before the effectiveness of cold calling or cold emailing companies. I was wondering, through your experience with a smaller aerospace company to a larger aerospace company, what your thoughts on cold calling and cold emailing are now.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Big companies, very challenging cold calling because they have their processes. They have like the front door is HR, right? So that's tougher. On smaller companies, I think the odds go up. I think energy and the willingness to do something outside the norm is sometimes rewarded. It's like going to Vegas, though. It's like, I would say it's 1 in 4 odds. You may have 3 companies that say, oh, doesn't that person read the website? It says go through HR, right? But then there's the 1 out of 4 companies that say, wow, I really like his inventiveness and his desire to just pick up the phone and call. I've heard a lot of stories about good things coming to people who picked up the phone call. But I think it's hit and miss. So I don't think it's, so if I would say you certainly do the normal processes for the companies that you're trying for. Stay within the bounds so they can tell you're reading the website, you're good at following directions, but you could augment that. Perhaps it'd be with smaller companies, if you wanted to, you could augment that with some cold calling But you have to get that first 30 seconds of the call has to be pretty well tuned, you know. So I would say don't rule it out, and sometimes it'll be rewarded for going out thinking out of the box.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I have a short question. So I just did an
Sure.
interview over the weekend, and I was worried about going over time, but not illustrating enough so that the interviewer understands my situation, allowing me to explain or answer the question. Does the interviewer care more about how much time I put in the question or the quality? Because I know they value like if I'm wasting their time or not. So yeah.
Well, the nirvana state, I'll say, when brevity and conciseness is mated up with relevance and precision, you have a crossing point where you've given them the right amount of words and you've answered their question completely, but you've done it in a concise manner. That's like gold because it does a couple of things. One is that you now have time to go off script and be you. And like I said, being you is success oriented, right? You're trying to convince them that you as a person is valuable to their company and they're going to make a mistake if they let you go. That's your opportunity to convince them of that, right? So if you went on and on and on to answer a question that could have been 3 sentences, you've now wasted an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And you've told them a little bit about you. I mean, I will tell you though, this is like throwing stones at a glass. I live in a glass house. I'm not throwing stones because somebody asked me a question that might be a 1 or 2 sentence. I unfortunately tend to go on for 8 or 10 or 12. It's one of my character flaws. I'm still working at it at my age. So it's hard, but as you rehearse and you practice, you can get to a point when, especially if you're videoing some mock interviews, you can get to a point where you nail the question in a handful of sentences. And now, you know, I'm going to branch into something that tells them who Tiffany is, right? So I think that would be the perfect state. Nail it in a few sentences and get to make an impression about who you are.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and stop you there. Thank you guys for all your questions. It's really great to hear from you. And Mark, if it's okay with you, could we do a group picture?
Sure.
All right,
Absolutely.
cool.